Hi, I'm Tammy Greenberg, Senior Vice President for Business Development at RAB, and welcome to Radio on Main Street, the podcast all about radio. Our latest podcast series comes to you from the 2023 ANA Masters of Marketing Conference, where the marketing, advertising, and media industry all come together with a laser focus on growth. The conference showcases creative thinking, strategies, and best practices that leading brands have implemented to drive growth by meeting and exceeding their consumers' needs. Radio was very well represented at this conference, and Audacy had a tremendous presence, sharing both Audacy's and audio's capabilities with marketers while soaking in the insights that chief brand officers had to share. In episode number 10, of Radio on Main Street at the ANA Masters of Marketing, RAB's President and CEO Erica Farber speaks with Brian Benedik, Chief Revenue Officer of Audacy, to gain some of his takeaways.
Brian, it's wonderful to catch up with you here at Radio on Main Street at the ANA.
Well, thank you, Erica. It's good to see you. It's good to see the RAB back and in a wonderful place here. I think you probably have the prime spot at the ANAs, so good to see.
Well, we worked hard for it.
Yeah, of course. But honestly, I mean that on behalf of our industry, it's important that the RAB is here talking with a lot of folks. We appreciate that.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for your support. So give us a thumbnail of the ANA from your perspective.
Yeah, this is, it's interesting. I've been fortunate to be a part of the ANA community for probably a decade now in my past adventures, and so I've learned a lot around the value that they bring, to all stakeholders, but in our case, to the supply side. And so when I came to Audacy 20 months ago or so, one of my first questions is, hey, are we part of the ANA community? The answer was no. And we said, okay, well, we have to really figure out a way to do that. So this is our second year being a partner with the ANAs.
Right.
And we sort of approach it, Erica, from a couple of perspectives. We're obviously a large ad platform, so most of the folks here are partners, and those that are not, we obviously have an opportunity to talk to them. But we're also a marketer ourselves, and so listening and learning to some of these sessions, like I love that. I mean, I learn a ton about what brands are doing, and I mean, just this morning hearing from Mazda and Land O'Lakes and 7-Eleven around what they're doing. I mean, I got pages of notes that I'm bringing home, again, from a marketer perspective. So we look at it from kind of from those two lenses, and there's a lot of value that the ANA brings to our business. Keep in mind, as you know, the Audacy brand is only a couple of years old.
Yes.
So we've got work to do to make sure this brand resonates with this community. So the ANA helps us a lot there.
So for so many of our listeners and viewers who are in the radio business who can't come here, one of the very special things that happens at the ANA, and you talk about the sessions, is that individual brands and companies, they not only present, but they share very specific case studies with us.
Sure.
And are there any messages that you've been hearing over the last couple of days that are standing out that you think would be important for all of us in the audio space to be thinking about?
Yeah, maybe a couple things just because they're so fresh in my mind, Erica, from today being Thursday, day 3. Mazda talked this morning about putting the people in the center of everything, meaning not just their clients, people who buy cars, but their employees. That's critical. I mean, people are going through a lot right now.
So valuing not only the consumer, but their own teams.
100%. And I think, as simple as that sounds, really healthy companies do that. And I think it's a good message for all of us in the radio/audio business. We have to do that. This has been a really disruptive few years. People don't feel connected to something. And I think as companies, and think about what we do all day in the radio business, we add a lot of value. We bring communities together.
Right.
So putting our employees at the center of that I think is critical. So that was interesting to me. We just came out of a session where the Chief Marketing Officer of Land O'Lakes was speaking.
Yes.
And what they're doing for rural America. I mean, I was fascinated by her presentation today. I mean, that what they're doing, the support and investments they're making in, because we all think of Land O'Lakes as butter in our refrigerator, but they're doing so much more for farmers and rural America and really representing that community. So I think about that in terms of our brand. What's our brand purpose? Is it refined enough? Is it clear enough? Have we landed that with our various stakeholders? So that's what coming out of what's such a rich few days for me here is the purpose that a lot of these brands have, and they just pound that message to not only their consumers but their employees. So that becomes very interesting to me.
Well, the theme this year is a force for growth and a force for good. And as you say, it's such an important message for any company. And as we like to say in radio, frequency does work.
It does. It does. We know that message well. Yes.
Sometimes we don't always do it, but we need to maintain that.
Well, and that, to that point, Erica, as you know, I think the pendulum tends to swing a little out of whack. This idea of purpose and growth, you can do both, but sometimes it swings one way and then it swings another. At the end of the day, and one of the things I heard that came out of the ANA CMO Growth Council on Monday was, hey, let's remind ourselves we're here to grow the business. That's at the end of the day, we can do all this fancy stuff, but if it's not growing, it's a problem. And I think we have to keep in mind that growth is sort of a means to an end, but at the end of the day, that's what we're all judged on, and it's important. And sometimes that gets a little bit out of whack.
Brian, you have such an interesting background because you had worked in broadcast radio, and then you went to a large streaming company.
Yes.
And now you are back with a large media company that represents both broadcast and streaming. So I think you have such a rich background. When you were focused 100% on streaming, and now you're representing both, how does that experience sort of help us embrace not only streaming, but makes us feel good about our own broadcast stations?
Yeah, it's interesting, Eric. It's given me some good perspective the last decade or so, because like you said, I spent the first half of my career on the linear radio side, both on the local and national, and really learned a lot. And then I kind of went in the mid-2000s as the digital audio that started to move. I jumped in early there, learned and listened, made a zillion mistakes, but frankly came out of that to where I jumped into Spotify, which was a wonderful 7-year adventure. And then the opportunity came up to come back, but what I look at it as, I came back to a company that was more on the holistic audio side. So how taking linear radio, streaming, podcasting, right, in this immersive experience with audio. And it's given me a deep appreciation, probably a deeper one than I thought, to be honest with you, around linear radio.
Right.
What it means for our communities, how important it is.
And when you say linear radio, you specifically are talking about AM, FM.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. The challenge, though, and what I spend a lot of time doing, and I'm doing this with our peers across the industry, is we have to make sure we're landing the story of linear radio, AM, FM, as much as we can, because we're sort of losing that war, perceptual war. There's this thinking of all of the listening is happening on the digital channels, and you and I know that's not the case. If anything, 70% of the listening is happening to AM, FM radio.
Correct.
But if you asked a lot of these marketers here, to take a guess as to what that percentage is, I think we would be very surprised with what the answers are. So this is the work that you do, the work that we're doing. I just think we need to get tighter, more connected around that work. It's more important than ever right now. And because again, back to your question, I've even in the 15 years I worked originally in AM, FM radio, I have a deeper appreciation of it today than I even did back then, and how important it is.
Oh, really? Yeah. That's fascinating. But you also bring up a good reminder that we have to all be consistently telling the story.
We do, because nobody's telling it for us.
Yes.
Right? And I think part of the challenge we have is sometimes you have these marketers that tend to only listen to audio on certain streaming platforms, right? So that there's this inherent bias in their mind that everyone's doing it this way. And that's not the case.
Right.
So I ran into Pierre here, in the hallways, and obviously our CMO, Paul Suchman, and what Gail's doing at iHeart, what you and your team are doing. We just have to do this better, more connected.
And Hubbard is here.
Hubbard is here.
Great.
I mean, it's nice to see our community here, right?
Yes.
Out in force. But just telling that AM, FM story to local and national and anyone in between, super critical, and we have to treat it as our utmost priority, in my view.
You talk to a lot of CMOs and companies. What advice do you have for all of us in the broadcast side? How can we be better connecting? What could we be doing a better job of when we're calling on advertisers and potential new advertisers?
Yeah, I think part of it, and this is why I love this event so much, and frankly, the sessions in the ballroom behind us, is understanding and learning what a CMO is going through right now.
Yes.
It is hard. It is not easy being a CMO of any company at the moment. And so, sometimes we'll walk in to a meeting with a CMO without any understanding of what he or she's going through. And that's a problem. And so I think learning, listening, it doesn't have to be necessarily at the ANAs, but there are so many forums where we can understand their business. I know it sounds simple, but being a CMO today is so different than what it was 5 years ago, never mind 20 years ago.
Yes.
And that sometimes we step over ourselves without walking in with that understanding.
Again, it's a good reminder, we can't provide them any solutions if we don't know what the issue is
100%.
or the opportunity.
100%. I mean, I'll tell you something. Listening to the Land O'Lakes CMO just speak, they have one of the things I learned, which again is somewhat understandable, but I didn't think about this before, is the rural farming community has a higher rate of suicide than most others. Now, we just came off an event at Audacy, Erica, called We Can Survive.
Yes.
10 years running now. We had it in LA at the Hollywood Bowl for 9 years. We moved it this year to the New York area at the Prudential Center 2 weekends ago. We just had a sellout crowd at Prudential. We had A-list level of artists. It was a resounding success by all metrics, but the biggest metric that I'm most proud of is we raised over $600,000 for suicide prevention. So back to
fantastic.
Understanding what I need to talk to Heather, the CMO of Land O'Lakes, about what they're doing for farmer suicide prevention. How can my event help them? How can I put that to work for Land O'Lakes? So we have to listen and learn, and not just sort of walk into these CMO meetings and just talking about us and radio. Let's understand them first.
Right.
So anyway, that's something I just literally learned a half hour ago.
No, but we have this great voice that we can amplify, and we need to use it wisely.
No question.
Use it wisely.
And the word amplify, I think, is a very relevant word, because we have such scale with what we do as broadcasters. And then, of course, you add the streaming audio and the podcast components. I think about my old stomping grounds on the streaming side. Our audiences dwarf theirs, but that story needs to be told better, tighter, more connected. So that's what this A&A community needs to hear.
Well, you've got my mind going, I'll tell you. Not enough hours in the day.
Yeah. Well, again, we'll do it better together. I think it's a much more powerful story with the broadcasters, the RAB. I think about Katz and some of the work that they're doing. How do we just get better, kind of connected around that work, which is something we'll talk more about.
Well, so I'm going to ask you to look in the crystal ball. It's been a challenging year.
Yeah.
For everyone.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter the market size, the size of the company.
Sure.
What are you most focused on? And if you could get us to all focus on one thing, what should we be thinking about?
Well, yeah, a couple thoughts. It's certainly hard to control the environment. There has been headwinds in advertising.
Yes.
You sort of have the small amount of super large digital companies taking such a disproportionate amount of ad revenue, and it's because obviously the level of audience data that they have, the outcomes that the marketer outcomes that they can certainly help to deliver. So there's a lot of goodness there that I certainly don't want to downplay. However, if you sort of look out to where the marketing industry is going and how audio and radio can meet that challenge, a couple things. One, let's tell a better story, and that's what we talked about now for a few minutes. But then, how can we continue the work? Like I think about what we've done with the Audacy app. That was 2 years ago. That was called radio.com. We had to completely reimagine that entire app, from soup to nuts, the whole back end, the whole front end. We're on a good path now. What we're doing there in terms of that user experience, collecting user data that can be properly used for investment purposes with brands. The podcast side of our business, how do we thoughtfully bring podcast in alongside of broadcast and AM/FM? So I think that the holistic audio story is certainly one that we need to keep pounding. I think it's something that the marketing community needs to better understand, because let's face it, I think in a very positive way, we're in this audio renaissance now. There's more people listening to audio than ever before. That's a plus for us, right, as a community. But there's also more competition than ever before. And we have to realize that, between the Spotifys, the Pandoras, the Amazons, the YouTubes, and more. So it's not, this world is very different than it was, 10 years ago.
Absolutely.
So we have to be on our game. So I tend to be an optimist by nature, Erica. I am hopeful, for 2024 and beyond. Obviously, it's a big political year, which tends to bring a lot of goodness to the radio community, but it doesn't mean that that's going to carry it all.
Right.
We need to continue to do the hard work in other areas too. So again, I tend to look at things, with blue sky than the other way.
I'm with you.
Yeah.
My glasses are rose-colored.
Well,
always.
As long as our glasses are rose-colored, but we also have a sense of realism too.
No question.
That's the way I tend to look at the world too. So I look at it with optimism. It's, like I said, it's been a tough year for most, but a new year is coming, and we're excited about it.
As you know, our campaign is, we talk about Radio Matters and Radio Works. So if you could complete the sentence, Radio Matters because?
Because I think we drive outcomes for clients. And I think part of, I was taught by a mentor of mine, Bob McCurdy, long ago, he had a saying, if you can't prove it, you're wrong. And I think that I didn't really understand it when I was younger, but now as I'm a better marketer, particularly coming out of some of the sessions over the last few days, marketers need proven outcomes. Radio can provide that. But I think it's, once again, back to just making sure we're sort of better organized as an industry. What do those outcomes sort of look like? We can do that. And I as I talk, like I said, I have the privilege of getting access to a lot of CMOs on a day-to-day basis. They all are very pro radio, but what they say to me a lot is, can you prove it? Can you help me? Because
Yes.
I obviously have a lot of my media channels that need to work together. Radio needs to be able to provide, sort of proof of concept like the other channels can.
They're all looking for that attribution.
100%, and
Yes.
it's real. So I think again we're taking some baby steps to get there. We have to accelerate that work.
And Radio Works because?
Radio works because we have because we build communities. That's why radio works. And back to having more appreciation for AM/FM now than even and I did 10, 15 years ago. The value we provide to local communities on the radio side, Erica, is better than any. I'll put that up against any other medium, and we forget that sometimes. I didn't have any of that at Spotify. That wasn't part of our conversation. That is a real value driver on the radio side now, and I think let's not forget that. Let's continue to lean into our strengths there. Once again, back to just reminding me why this industry is so special. That's a big part of what I think about too.
Well, Spotify's loss is definitely radio's gain. So welcome back.
Well, thank you. It's good to be back with you and others here, in our community. And like I said in the beginning, I'm so thrilled that the RAB continues to come down. This is really the Super Bowl for marketers, the ANA Masters.
Yes, it is.
You being here, you being in this position, as people are coming in and out of the ballroom, we're all very proud of that. So thank you.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate you spending a few minutes
Of
with
course,
me.
my pleasure.
Brian reminds us that despite the challenges and competition stemming from a more complicated marketing and media landscape, we are really fortunate to be in an audio renaissance right now. And we collectively need to continue telling radio's powerful stories so that the marketing community truly hears and understands it. Radio builds communities and radio drives outcomes. We just need to continuously drive it home to our advertisers and our prospects.
If you'd like to learn more about radio and its many benefits, we invite you to visit us at rab.com, or you can email us directly at askrab@rab.com. Until next time, It's Radio on Main Street.